time doesn't heal all wounds, you do. And if you've been sitting around waiting for the clock to heal the pain of your grief, then this might be the wake-up call that you didn't know that you needed. In this video, we're going to be unpacking the lie that time heals all wounds, or also the other side of that lie that says that grief can never be healed, that no amount of time will offer the healing. We're going to explore what healing actually looks like and how to deploy practical steps to launch your own healing. Hey, I'm Kelly Nielsen, and after recovering from my own horrendous grief and loss, I developed a proven faith-based, neuroscience-informed process that helped my own recovery and has now helped hundreds of other people recover. Let's dive into today's topic. Okay, today we're going to be talking about both sides of the time lie. Our culture tends to perpetuate these two time myths that are both equally damaging and will keep you stuck no matter which side you believe. The first side is that time heals all wounds. If you think that time heals all wounds, you're not going to take any action. So why do people believe that in the first place? I think there's a couple of reasons they believe that. Number one, we want to believe that it's true. We want to think if we just sit and rest and let enough time go by that we'll just feel better. That's a heck of a lot easier than facing the pain or doing the work. I think another reason why we want to believe it is it's so prevalent in our culture. There's a whole lot of people that believe that and say that and spout that. And people in your support system might even be telling you that. Like, oh, well, with enough time, you'll feel better. So we want to believe it, right? We want to just let time do its thing and recover from grief and loss. I also want to talk about the other side of the time coin, that is, you'll never recover. There's no amount of time that is required for your healing. You'll never recover from this. You'll just learn to live with it. Both are equally damaging because they both perpetuate this feeling of victimhood, or that you don't play an active part, or that you don't have responsibility or autonomy or control about your healing and recovery. Both of those things are untrue and they will both keep you stuck. Okay, so time is an ingredient for healing, but it is not the totality of healing. And some time is required for healing, but it's not an indefinite amount of time, okay? So if we know that time is not the source of healing, first of all, if you know that, if you've been sitting and waiting for time to do its thing, and you are no further recovered than when you started, and you want some extra help with that, check out the link in the description. We'd be happy to help you out. But now, since we know that time is not the thing that creates healing, right? And there is no indefinite period of time that it takes to heal, what does healing require? Like, what is our active part in healing? What is required if it isn't time? Well, the analogy that I came up with is that time is like these two eggs. And if you wanted to make a cake, eggs are required to make a cake. I wouldn't know actually, but I assume. If you make a cake from scratch, I believe eggs are involved. So if you were to say that eggs alone are all you need to make a cake, and you set those eggs on the table and you waited a really long time, no matter how much time goes by, you will never have a cake, right? What you need to do is take the eggs and you need to crack them and add them to other things, mix them up in a specific process, in a specific order, put it in a pan, put it in the oven, and then wait a specified period of time, and then you will have a cake. So eggs are just like time when it relates to our healing process. They are a piece of the puzzle, but they aren't the entire puzzle. And if you do the right activities in the right order for the right duration of time, at the end, you will have a cake. It's not some elusive goal that we'll never be able to obtain. It's not something that we will just endure or survive for the rest of our days. We can, in fact, crack the eggs, take the steps, and make a cake. So what does making a cake look like? As we mentioned, time is a piece of it. Now, the reason that time is an ingredient in the healing recipe and equation is that, neurologically speaking, in order to process the emotions and rewire our thoughts for healing, that takes a certain amount of time. We've learned through neuroscience that either removing a thought or creating a new thought loop in our mind takes 21 days, okay? So thinking a thing and meditating on it repeatedly for 21 days will either cause that new thought to form, or purposefully ignoring an old thought or rewiring it takes 21 days to do that work. And then beyond that, it takes 63 days or 3 cycles of 21 days for that thought to become automatic. for that thought to move from your conscious mind to your subconscious mind, right? Your short-term memory to your long-term memory. It becomes part of your filter. It becomes part of your paradigm. It becomes automatic after that 63 days, right? So we can't do the work of healing instantaneously. Time is absolutely an ingredient, but number one, time isn't the only ingredient, and it isn't as long of a time as we probably previously thought. As I mentioned, if you do really intentional work around the thoughts and feelings related to grief and you do rewiring work, within 63 days, you can have a new mindset established around that. That's just a couple of months. So that is actually a much shorter period of time than most people talk about struggling with grief and dealing with grief and all that kind of stuff. So time is an important part of the equation. Another reason why time is a piece of the equation but not the whole picture is that there are certain milestones and benchmarks that you just have to walk through. You're not going to know how to handle the anniversary of your loved one's passing until you walk through the anniversary of your loved one's passing. So that does require a certain amount of time for you to even be in the place to learn how to deal with that. And so much about recovering from grief and loss is tied to trial and error and rewiring your mind and finding your new way forward. So you're going to try some things that don't work well. You're going to try some things that do work well. You're going to develop different skill sets and coping skills based on the type of situation that you're in. And you're just going to find over time the ones that serve you well and the ones that don't. And you may find that you outgrow certain coping mechanisms or support levels of support as you navigate through your grief recovery. So again, time is an important piece of the puzzle, but it's not the only piece. And I got to reiterate again that this other myth that like you'll never recover, that healing isn't available, that you're just going to be sad and carrying this grief with you for the rest of your days, that is not true. Because if you believe that, no matter what you do, you're always going to be sad, you're always going to be carrying this grief. Even if you do the activities of healing, you have an underlying subconscious belief or even conscious belief that you're not going to recover. So your brain will filter any information you receive about healing and about recovery, and it will filter it out. See, whatever beliefs we've adopted into our subconscious mind becomes the lens and the filter that we receive everything through. So if you've told yourself again and again and again that you will never heal, your brain is actually going to filter the information it receives to further fortify and solidify the fact that you're not going to heal. So you could even be learning a strategy or a skill for how to heal, and your brain won't be able to receive it because you've been conditioned by the thought that you will never heal. So it's so important what our beliefs are about time as it relates to grief and loss. Because again, if you believe that time heals all wounds, then you'll never take an active role. You'll just sit around and expect the eggs to become cake without ever doing anything with them. But conversely, if you believe that you'll always be sad and always carrying grief, then you will do everything to make the cake, and you will purposefully leave the eggs out and make a cake that flops and isn't all that it could be because your brain doesn't let you receive it. So that's what this video is about, is how can we take the ingredient of time with our other ingredients, and what does that look like to practically walk that out so that we can receive healing? And how much time is required for healing? Okay, so if we know that time doesn't heal all the wounds, it's our actions that heal wounds and produce healing. Here's a question: how much time actually is required for healing? I will say two things. It's different for everybody. And also, as I mentioned earlier, there are some landmarks that you're going to have to cross and deal with. Now, you may be in a stronger or lesser strong place of healing when you have to cross those benchmarks, that they're going to be something to navigate no matter how much healing work you've done, right? The first anniversary, person's birthday, whether Mother's Day, Father's Day, things like that. Those are going to be dates to contend with. But the healing time frame can be as short as 10 weeks. Actually, that's the program that we put folks through is 10 weeks long. And as we mentioned before, from a neuroscience standpoint, 63 days is the time that it takes to rewire your mind and adopt a thought into your subconscious mind for healing. Now, you probably have more than one thought that you need to rewire, so you may need to do that 63-day cycle several times, right? But there's no reason why you can't be well on your way to healing and or healed within 10 weeks or a few cycles of those 63 days. Once you know the thoughts that you need to target and how to rewire those thoughts and the process for doing that and having your subconscious mind receive them and have your body receive that as truth, then you absolutely will be walking and healing from grief. So the reason time frame would vary is how familiar people are with these types of things before coming to this work. You know, if you were familiar with neuroscience and some of this work, you might be able to adapt and adopt it a little bit more quickly. The second big ingredient is how consistent are you with this work? Let's use the analogy of training for a marathon or working out. You know, if you go to the gym and you have a plan and you are consistent with your plan and you show up and you do the work, you're going to be prepared for the marathon. If you were in great health before you started training, you're going to be able to prepare for that marathon probably faster than someone who's never worked out a day in their life. You know, maybe they're coming with poor health to begin with, and then if they're inconsistent with their training, if they don't know what training to do and or don't follow a consistent plan for their training, then it's going to take them significantly longer to get ready for that marathon. So that's a little bit how time can show up differently. Depending on the work that you've done before coming into grief in terms of your thought life and being aware of your thoughts and feelings and neuroplasticity and all that kind of stuff is a huge factor. Knowing what to do and when to do it, being consistent in following that plan, these are all factors for how much time it is going to take you personally to heal and recover from grief and loss. But I want to encourage you, this isn't a competition, right? Like I always say, I'm not going to run a 4-minute mile, right? Like that's just not in my makeup. It's also not a desire that I have, but there are people out there who can do it. And even though I'll never run a 4-minute mile, I absolutely could hire a running coach to teach me how to run as fast as I can, right? With my genetic and physical makeup, my current level of physical health, how fast can I run? And that's what we aim to do for people. We're not here to say, hey, you have to recover from grief in 2 months or whatever it is. But we're here to say, hey, there are tools and things that you can do that absolutely could make that available for you. And even if 2 to 3 months isn't possible for you, what is the shortest amount of time that you can move through this so that you can get back to living and enjoying your life? Grief is a painful, excruciating thing, and we should all have the aim to not want to prolong it longer than necessary, right? We should want to face it, get in, do the work, and figure out how to get on the other side of grief and grieving so that we can get back to living our lives. Now, for those of you that are freaking out about the idea of just rushing through grief and getting back to life, hear me when I say that this does not mean you're leaving your loved one behind. No. In fact, part of the work, a big part of the work of processing grief and doing all this rewiring of your thoughts is learning to rewire your thoughts in a way that brings your loved one with you as you go forward, right? How are you thinking about the loss? How are you remembering your loved one? That's all very intentional steps in the healing process. So nobody's talking about skipping steps. Nobody's talking about leaving your loved one behind, but I want you to open your mind to the idea and the possibility that what people have told us about grief and grieving was wrong, that healing is available, and that if we put our intention and attention on the work of healing, that we can actually experience healing in a much shorter time than we ever thought possible. That's what I did for myself, and that is what I have seen hundreds of people be able to do. So I hope this video challenges you to rethink what you're believing about time as it relates to your grief recovery. I hope we have poked some holes into those lies and given you some information to chew on and consider for a little bit. So if time heals all wounds and is out there in our culture and it's not true, what are the true things about grief that don't get talked about? What are the realities about grief and grieving that nobody seems to talk about? Check out this next video to hear more about that. Until next time.